The giant's warning. The wind that swept down from the mountains carried with it the smell of pine, dust, and the faint memory of storms. The ranch lay on the far edge of town, where fences leaned and fields spread out for miles, dotted with cattle that seemed as weary as their master. That master was Ethan Graves, known to most folks as the Giant. He wasn't a man you forgot once you laid eyes on him. 6.5 feet tall, shoulders like the beams of a barn, hands scarred and heavy, and eyes so deep-set they seemed carved in stone. Some said he had buried his heart years ago with his wife, who had died giving birth to a son that never lived past his first breath. Since then, Ethan lived alone. Alone with his cattle, alone with his silence, alone with the bottle on nights too long for sleep. Folks whispered about him, some feared him, some pitied him, but no one dared to get close. Until she came. Her name was Clara Mayfield, a girl not much older than 17, thin as a rail from hunger and work, with hair the color of wheat and eyes that carried a stubborn light. She had no kin left, not since her mama passed and her stepfather tossed her out like a stray pup unfit for keeping. Word traveled fast in town that the giant was looking for someone to cook and keep his house in order. Not a wife, not a companion, just hands to work the kitchen and sweep out the dust. The pay was meager, but to Clara it meant survival. She showed up on his porch one raw morning, shivering in a patched shawl. Ethan opened the door, filling the frame like a mountain. His voice was a rumble. "You're here only to cook for me. Nothing else." The words struck like iron on an anvil. He said them without warmth, without room for question. His eyes narrowed, as though daring her to misunderstand. Clara swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll cook, and I'll do it right." He grunted, turned his back, and walked into the shadow of the house. That was all the welcome she got. Life with the giant was unlike anything Clara had known. The ranch house, though large, was bare and cold. No laughter had lived there in 14 years. Dust-coated shelves where family trinkets might have been. The only sound was the heavy tread of Ethan's boots and the groan of wood in the wind. Every day, Clara cooked, biscuits at dawn, stew at midday, beans and meat at dusk. She scrubbed the pans until her fingers ached, swept the floor, mended shirts that were more patch than cloth. Ethan rarely spoke more than a few words, and when he did, they were commands, not conversation. Yet Clara noticed things he never said. She saw the way he paused at the small grave out back before saddling his horse. She noticed how carefully he mended the fence lines, as though keeping cattle in was the only thing keeping him tethered to this world. She even noticed, one cold night, how he left an extra quilt folded at the foot of her bed without a word. Though he had warned her, Clara felt something stir in her heart, a quiet ache, not of fear, but of longing. Not the longing of a girl for a man, but of a daughter for a father she never truly had. And slowly, against the giant's will, the house began to change. One morning, Clara left a small wildflower in a jar on the table. Ethan scowled when he saw it, muttered about nonsense clutter, but he didn't throw it out. Another time, she hummed a tune while cooking, and though he grumbled about noise, his eyes softened, just for a moment. The townsfolk noticed too. They whispered how the giant no longer sat alone at the saloon, how his clothes looked mended, how there was sometimes smoke from the chimney long after supper, as though the house itself had found breath again. Still, Ethan kept his walls high. "You're here to cook, girl," he reminded her whenever she lingered too close, whenever her laughter echoed too long. "Don't go forgetting." But the warning grew weaker each time he said it. The turning point came one stormy night. Rain pounded the roof, lightning split the sky, and the cattle panicked against the fences. Ethan cursed, pulling on his coat and rushing out into the mud. Clara, without thought, followed with a lantern, sloshing into the dark despite his shouted command to stay put. They fought the storm together, driving cattle back, mending rails in the whipping wind. At one point, a steer broke loose, charging with wild eyes. Clara froze, the lantern shaking in her hands. Ethan moved faster than a man his size had a right to, scooping her up, tossing her behind him, facing down the beast until it bolted away into the rain. Back inside, dripping and breathless, Clara whispered, "You saved me." Ethan's jaw clenched. He looked at her with something raw in his eyes, something he had buried long ago. "Don't make me do that again, girl. You hear? You're only here to cook." But Clara, bold in her youth, lifted her chin. "Maybe. But I'd rather cook for you than starve for anyone else." And for the first time in years, the giant almost smiled. The word she chose. Weeks bled into months. Winter came down from the mountains, blanketing the ranch in silence and snow. Clara grew stronger, her cheeks fuller, her laughter brighter. The house warmed with her presence, though Ethan never admitted it aloud. One evening, after supper, Clara sat at the table sewing a button. Ethan lingered by the fire, pipe in hand. The silence between them was heavy but no longer sharp. Without looking up, Clara said softly, "Do you ever miss having family, Mr. Graves?" The question cut deep. Ethan's hand stilled on the pipe. His eyes burned at the memory of a wife's touch, a baby's cry that never lasted. He forced his voice flat. "Family just leaves you. Best not to want what you can't keep." Clara's needle paused. Her throat tightened, but she didn't press further. It was spring when the past finally came knocking. A wagon rolled into the yard, driven by a man with Clara's stepfather's sneer. He demanded she come back, said she belonged to him until he decided otherwise. Ethan's shadow fell across the yard as he stepped out, towering, silent, fists curling like thunderclouds. "She's mine to keep," the man spat. Ethan's voice was low, steady, dangerous. "No. She's mine to protect." The stepfather laughed nervously, but the sound faltered when Ethan took a single step closer. "Now you best turn that wagon around before I put you in the ground." The man didn't wait for another warning. Wheels spun, dust rose, and the wagon disappeared down the road. Clara, trembling, looked up at the giant. "Why did you do that for me?" Ethan's chest rose and fell. His voice was rough. "Because no one protected my own when they needed it." That night, Clara crept into the kitchen, where Ethan sat at the table, staring at nothing. She hesitated, then spoke the words she had been holding in her heart. "Father." The giant flinched as though struck. Slowly he turned, his eyes wide, searching hers. "What did you say?" Clara swallowed hard, tears burning. "I said, Father, that's what you are to me. Not just a man who feeds me or gives me work. Not just someone who saved me. You're the father I never had." The silence was heavy. Ethan's breath caught. His fists unclenched. Something inside him, long locked away, broke open. For the first time in 14 years, the giant wept. Clara moved to his side, resting her hand on his rough, scarred one. He didn't pull away. He let her stay. From that day forward, the ranch was never the same. The girl who came to cook had given the giant something greater than food or warmth. She had given him family again. And though he still barked and grumbled, though his words were often stern, he no longer warned her that she was there only to cook, because both of them knew the truth. She was his daughter, and he was her father.